Order. The House and Committee for the Consideration of the Budget Measures Financial Support of Newborn Children Bill is resumed. Members, when the committee was suspended last night, Jacinda Ardern had the call. She has about 2 3/4 minutes.
Oh, is that all? Mr. Chair, what it does. Remaining 2 3/4 minutes remaining in this call. Oh, right, I've got, so technically up to an extra 5 if I'm lucky. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought it might be. Well, I think I managed to clock up 40 last night, so I'm still waiting for the Minister in the chair to match me call for call in this debate. I thought it might be helpful to recap, Mr. Chair, on where we were in this debate. We're in committee stages, obviously. Last night we debated part 1 of the bill, which talked about the extension of paid parental leave. So the extension from 14 weeks to 18 weeks, that was basically all that part 1 did. Despite the Minister talking about the extension of eligibility, that's not actually what this bill is doing. He says it's coming. Now that's interesting. Last night the Minister went to great lengths to try and claim that Labor's comprehensive policies on both paid parental leave but also the Best Start policy, which is quite a significant package, fully costed, fully stepped out, based on consultation with the sector. He claimed that the policy work hadn't been done. And yet here we are debating a little bit of paid parental leave changes, just one simple change from 14 to 18 weeks, that's it, that's what the bill is. Just a little bit of what the government announced, because I suspect the policy work hasn't been done. That's my very big suspicion, Mr. Chair. And why would I expect that that might be the case? Well, from what I was reading of the regulatory impact statements last night, some of the briefing papers weren't actually being churned out by the government until last month. So my strong suspicion, Mr. Chair, in responding to what the Minister has said, is that perhaps some of it was done in a bit of a rush. And that brings me to part 2, because part 2, which we've only just begun debating, and I'm sure will be a comprehensive discussion this morning, part 2 contains the changes to the parental tax credit. Very simple changes made in that part of the bill. Changes that the Minister, again astounded by this statement, he said that they're extending support to people who got nothing from Labor. Absolutely unbelievable statement made by the Minister in the chair, because there have always been losers out of the system that we currently have, and Labor's policy was clearly focused on trying to plug those gaps. So for the parental tax, let's actually look at who those losers are and how that's changed, because the parental tax credit was always about plugging that gap, supposedly. So we have roughly, Mr. Chair.
Jacinda Ardern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have roughly 60,000, give or take, births in New Zealand per annum. Of those births, we know that roughly 40% tend to be eligible for paid parental leave. Now, why is that? Well, under the existing criteria, which hasn't changed yet, you have to be in a job for a particular length of time. You have to be working for a certain number of hours. There's a number of criteria that often precludes people's eligibility. Now, the Minister's changed a bit of that criteria, and I applaud him for that. It's good to see. But out of that change, I think, what did he say, Minister? Was it 1,200, 1,400 people affected by that change, roughly, give or take? So, again, not a massive extension of the eligibility then for paid parental leave. Good, but not too significant. So Jenny Shipley in the 1990s recognised that gap existed. She pulled in the parental tax credit. Now, it's not for everyone. Not everyone who doesn't get paid parental leave automatically then receives the short-term parental tax credit. Let's be really clear about what the parental tax credit is. It's not the family tax credit. That's part of working for families, which Labor brought in, which cuts across the life of a child and is income tested. It's not the in-work tax credit, which is meant to be a payment to cover the extra costs of being in work when you have a family. It is the parental tax credit. At the moment, after these changes, it will be 10 weeks long. 10 weeks long. And it used to be at a rate of $150 under these changes in Part 2. It will be $220 for that 10-week period. So roughly, $2,000 for a family. Now, it kind of sounds like everyone who doesn't get paid parental leave is going to get that. Not so. In fact, the eligibility criteria is going to narrow, not yet in this bill. I believe that's yet to come, is it, Minister? I imagine that might be a revenue bill, perhaps. The criteria is going to narrow. So who misses out? Students miss out. Now, the reality is some people might say, well, if you're studying, well, why are you having kids? Well, there are people in many varying circumstances who might be, even at any age, in study at the time that they may fall pregnant. Life happens. And the fact that in New Zealand 50% of our pregnancies are unplanned. Life happens, and it's about making sure that when it does, parents are well supported to give their child that best start in life. People who are unemployed, and it might be the most temporary of unemployment, they might be transitioning between jobs and be temporarily on a job seeker allowance. They're not eligible for this extra support. They might be in a situation where their relationship is split up. Now, as dire as it sounds, there are relationships that fall apart when people find out they're pregnant. It is a major stressor in relationships, and it happens. Now, if they happen to then have to seek some sole parent support, not eligible either. So you could say that these are individuals who actually are probably in the most precarious of situations, potentially our most vulnerable families, and they are excluded from the parental tax credit. And I think, Mr. Chair, it's a really important point to make, because the extension that the government has made is in the length of time of the parental tax credit and to the amount, but not to who receives it. And that's always been one of the biggest downsides of the parental tax credit. It was a little bitsy thing that Jenny Shipley came up with that predominantly tends to go to families who might already be, for instance, parents who are staying at home to raise existing children, but under a certain income rate. Those tend to be the families who are receiving the parental tax credit. Families who already have children when another one is on the way, if they would like the longer form explanation of that. So those tend to be the ones who are falling into their eligibility criteria. The Minister has also said, though, that the criteria is going to change. So at the moment, yes, the parental tax credit is not universal outside of people on benefits. It is abated, it is income tested, and the income testing is going to narrow now. That's what we've been told. It's not what we're debating yet, but it is going to narrow. So that basically means that if you're currently eligible for the family tax credit, you're roughly on that kind of income range, then you're going to qualify for the parental tax credit. That's a rough guide that we've been given by the government. That means that there are some families who often miss out on any kind of support from government. They don't feel particularly wealthy, but they're not going to get anything now, Mr. Chair.
Sue Moroney.
Mr. Chair, great to have an opportunity to